Excellent. All right. The light
people I know
is here. I like when I can see faces, not just black screens.
Although black screens are fine, you know.
Yes.
Especially for those of us who have been on Zoom a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, today was Zoom day, so.
Thankfully, we don't have to do, library side, we don't have to do too many Zooms. So I only have like 3 a month. So I am not
Oh, that's not bad.
Just yet.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a good amount of people. So I think we'll give it a start. Okay. Oh, hold on, Bridget is messaging me. Okay. Welcome to the last local author summer series, and I picked the coolest day of September to do it. So, hooray! I heard there was a frost warning down here. But that's fine. Tonight we're going to be talking with Adrienne Martini. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Let me find your little bio. If I have to read it straight off the screen, or I will mess it up. But I would like to welcome everybody again to this. If you have any questions at all that just pop into your head that you want to ask, Adrienne at the end, because we will be taking a little, we'll be doing a little Q&A at the end. Just put them in the chat and then I will ask her those questions at the end. All right, Adrienne Martini is the current representative for District 12 to the Otsego County Board of Representatives. She's also an award-winning journalist who's written for Cooking Light and the Washington Post. That's not bad. Among other publications, and the author of Hillbilly Gothic and Sweater Quest, which I have right here behind me. When not wearing her county government hat, she works for SUNY Oneonta in the alumni office. That's on my alma mater. Yay! She lives in Oneonta, New York, with her husband, two kids, 2 cats, 1 corgi, and 1 husky polar bear mix. All right, I think we're going to start this with a little reading from Adrienne's book, Somebody's Gotta Do It, which is available here at the library. And if we don't have our 2 copies, you can get them from other libraries. This one is actually from Sydney because our copy wasn't around. All right.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so I put 2 links in the chat section just in case. One is a reminder to make sure you're registered to vote. The election is coming up. And the other is a reminder to go fill out your census form. Everybody should fill out their census form. I am going to read a little bit from the chapter about New York State, since we're in New York State. Figure we'll start there. There's an illustration. I'm not sure you can actually, as I get closer and closer and closer and closer. So that's the illustration showing where Otsego County is. I'm going to assume that you all know where Otsego County is, though. So when I say New York, most of the images that pop into non-New Yorkers' brains are of Times Square, the Statue of Liberty, and the Chrysler Building. You imagine enormous masses of rude people rushing around and dodging yellow cabs. If you think of green spaces, you think of Central Park. But that is not New York State. And it's really not even New York City, but that's beyond the scope of this information dump. New York State is the 4th most populous state in the nation. There are roughly 19 million New York State residents, and it is a reliably blue state when it comes to national elections. The itty-bitty little island is Manhattan, where 1.67 million people, give or take, live. If you count the population of that island plus the other 4 boroughs, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, and those together all make up the city of New York, you get 8.62 million people. One of my favorite sayings about the sheer number of bodies in that space was on a billboard years ago. 1 in a million, it asks. There are 8 of you here. Now you add in the 4.9 million people living in the counties within a 90-minute drive of Manhattan, you'll find 2/3 of the state's population lives in one megalopolis. Those big city plus its suburbs people are the reason the state goes blue. The other 6.4 million people fill out the rest of the surface area in this large state. Most of them live closer to Cleveland or Boston or Burlington than to New York City. Most live within 30 minutes of big cities such as Albany, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. One of the less populated parts of the state is called the North Country and is where most of the Adirondack Park is. Just drive a few minutes north from most of the North Country and you're in Canada. In the middle of the state, there are the Finger Lakes, a region known for wine, cheese, and the Ivy League University, Cornell. Scoot just a little east of the Finger Lakes and a little west of the Catskills, and you hit Otsego County. If you could find a way to evenly scatter the people who live here, you'd have 62 people per square mile. But Otsego Countians aren't evenly scattered, which is a pity because that would be incredibly convenient. Most live in Oneonta, which has a population equivalent to 1/4 of a New York City square mile, or Cooperstown, which has the same number of people as live in a smallish New York City apartment building. You are well aware of Cooperstown if you're any sort of baseball fan. Yes, the Hall of Fame is lovely. And yes, locals both love and hate Hall of Fame induction weekend because we love the tourist dollars, but bemoan the increased traffic. These 2 hubs are surrounded and separated by acres and acres of farmland, forest, rivers, mountains, and lakes. It is a beautiful country in the spring, summer, and fall. Its winter beauty is harder to appreciate, but you grow to love it in a Stockholm Syndrome kind of way. Otsego County, like the majority of New York's rural counties, is politically deep, deep red. If we only counted the votes from the rural parts of New York State, Trump would have won the popular vote in New York by a landslide. But because the population around New York City is so liberal and so populous, you'll never see all of New York State in red on a national election map. On a state government level, this divide causes no end of arguing. Downstaters are tired of all their tax money flowing upstate, which downstaters define as anything outside of New York City. Upstaters are ticked off that the crumbling New York City subway system gets far more attention than the urgent need for rural job opportunities. Every few years, the debate about upstate seceding from downstate is reignited, and all parties eventually agree on one thing, that all the state's 62 counties are better together. And the secession idea is going around again, so apparently it's time for it to come back up again in the great wheel of New York State politics. We'll see how it turns out this time. I suspect that we'll all stay one state, just like we usually do. Another point that all parties agree on is that the governor doesn't understand any issue he takes on, which is a puzzle, given that he is popular enough to keep getting reelected. And of course, I wrote this before COVID-19 kind of exploded. So I think people's opinions of Cuomo maybe have changed over the last 6-8 months, or not. We'll find out. So those are the 2 points of unity in a state full of political divides. Just like every single state in the Union, New York isn't as united as you'd hope. Somehow, though, we continue to muddle through. In the run-up to this 2016 presidential election, I'd scoped out the OCDC, the Otsego County Democratic Committee. I figured I could make a phone call or two for Hillary, even though I knew she didn't stand a chance of carrying my county, which had preferred Bernie in the Democratic primary. But the OCDC's website didn't fill me with hope or initiative, mostly because there wasn't much there. The website seemed more focused on social events than political action. I didn't even bother getting into contact with them. But then after early 2017, I reached out to Dave, a friend of a friend. Years ago, I'd coached his daughter in Girls on the Run, a national nonprofit whose mission is to develop confidence in elementary age girls by training them to run a 5K. I'd also nearly lost this daughter of his in the elementary school we were using as our base when I miscounted how many kids I had at the end of one of the practices. She's fine, by the way, having wandered off to the library to read rather than to run. Hopefully, Dave would be willing to let bygones be bygones. When I first contacted him, my initial thought was to help the OCDC with phone calls or fundraising or whatever it is that local branches of national parties do when the country is on fire. Maybe, I thought, it would feel as if I were actually doing something to #resist if I were part of a traditional structure and not just writing postcards in my dining room. Dave suggested setting up some time to talk at his house, which is just around the corner from mine. He made it sound like a formal meeting rather than a quick, here's who you need to call and hey, give us some money chit-chat. Because Dave has always struck me as a pretty formal guy in general, for example, I don't know that I've ever seen him in a t-shirt. And just as a point of fact, after I wrote this and after the book had come out, Dave actually texted a photo of himself to me while he was wearing a t-shirt, just to prove that it was something he was capable of doing, even if it is not his standard attire. I didn't think too much about his serious tone. At his house, though, the penny dropped when he said, would you consider running for the county board? What Dave couldn't hear, I think, was the hysterical laughter inside my head. I'm a middle-aged mom of two who makes her living shoving words around. I have a degree in theater, for Pete's sake. And I have written 2 books, including most recently, one about knitting, a subject that most important people who make policy don't give 2 craps about. I'm not a politician. Politicians understand how to manipulate public opinion, boss around the tax code, and make sure the sewers work. I can't even manipulate those to whom I gave birth, and I had once nearly lost Dave's 8-year-old in an empty school building. While I sat there blinking, he made his case. The county board has 2-year terms, and its members are up for election every odd year. The incumbent representative for our district, a Republican, would likely run unopposed in November 2017. During his past 4 years on the board, he had made some regressive choices, frequently hadn't shown up, and when he was there, it could be argued, he generally stood in the way of progress. He's beatable, Dave said, if someone smart, personable, and game was willing to give it a try. I told him I'd think about it, which was a lie. Why would I do something that was silly from its very beginning? I am not a strong candidate. To pick just one small example, in high school, I lit my bangs on fire lighting a cigarette on a gas stove. In my defense, it was the 80s and bangs were very big and held in place by gallons of Aquanet. Still, I can't picture Elizabeth Warren ever once having done that. I walked back to my house where my husband was making tacos for dinner. Those yellow kits can be a lifesaver when you're starving and out of really good ideas. That was weird, I told him, then recounted the whole conversation. Are you going to run? He said. Is that something you'd actually want to do? No, I said, because it wasn't something I could even imagine doing. But someone should. Over tacos, I mentioned running for the county board to the kids, who looked at me blankly. Would I have to do anything? My daughter asked. Not really, I said. I just won't be home as much. Cool, she said. So, are you going to do it? No, I said, but someone should. And that is how I wound up running for the county board. So that's the reading bit.
Excellent. So that is a great segue into my first question for you. We know how you got into running, but how did this book come about?
So the book came about because the election was in November. In November 2017, so by the summer of 2018, I started thinking that it would have been nice if I had the book I just wrote back when I was starting to run, because the book is kind of a mix of a memoir about how I made up my mind to run and some of the things I thought about while running, but there's also a good how-to in there, like here's how you try and keep track of finances. Here's some thoughts about putting together like flyers and ads. So it's kind of half how-to and half a memoir. And so Sweater Quest, which was my last book, I think came out probably 7 years ago. And I was you forget how hard it is to write books. It's like having that second kid. You forget how hard it was to have the first kid. So enough time had passed that it dawned on me that maybe I could write another book. It wasn't that bad. So I will go ahead and do that. And kind of there was a series of emails between my agent and I where I was just like, so do you think this would be a good idea? And she's like, not really, but we'll see what happens. So that's her answer for everything. It's generally, maybe it'll sell. I don't know. Let's try it. So that is how the book came about. And writing nonfiction is different from writing fiction. So usually with fiction, you write the whole book, and then you have the whole book that you kind of shop around. With nonfiction, it's a little bit different. You write a proposal, which is like 30 to 45 pages. Some of it is what the book, like the first couple chapters of the book, but then the rest is kind of marketing, outline, all of that kind of stuff. So I didn't write the book first and then send it out. I wrote the proposal, and the proposal is still a good chunk of writing, but then that's all that went out. So that's kind of how that happened.
Sure. And that's another good segue into my next question. This is all just tying together. So you did talk a little bit about the proposal, but after that, what did the process of writing this book look like for you?
Right. So by the time an editor was interested in the book, and you go through all of the paperwork and all of that kind of stuff, I knew going in that it would have a tight turnaround because they wanted it ready and on the shelf by March of 2020, before the 2020 election. So books, there's a longer lead on them. So in order for that March 2020 date to actually happen, a pretty good manuscript draft had to be in their hands by April 2019. So by the time the paperwork and everything was signed, it was at the end of December 2018. So there was essentially 4 months to write the book in. But I knew that was a possibility going in. So it wasn't like I was suddenly shocked that I only had 4 months. 4 months is not a lot of time. But I had worked for newspapers for, 10, 12 years. So I'm used to working at kind of at speed. I'm not as used to doing it with, a full-time job, with the county board, with children, with pets. So it was it was a push. so like the nuts and bolts of writing is I put together a sticker chart. I knew I had to write 1,600 words a day. So if I wrote my 1,600 words, I got my sticker. Had to not skip a day, because then I'd have to write 3,200 the next day, and that is not a thing I can do. So, you know, it was 4 months of my sticker chart. And then the last week before it was due, I actually left. I went to Amherst. No, I went to Northampton, Massachusetts. Found a relatively inexpensive hotel right in the center of Northampton where I could walk to restaurants, and just essentially lock myself in a room for 3 days, so that I could focus on just the one thing. So
It sounds like you did like NaNoWriMo.
yeah, no, it was a lot like that. Yeah. And I think this November I might actually try doing NaNoWriMo just for fun.
We're going to do a NaNoWriMo group for the library,
fun.
and we're going to do little side. For those of you who don't know, NaNoWriMo, NaNoWriMo is short for National Novel Writing Month. Basically, it's just a challenge to write 50,000 words, which is roughly the length of a novel. So look out for that, probably probably October, because there's some planning that needs to go into that, but it should be really fun. But that's exactly what.
Yes. And that's, you know, I'm a big fan of a sticker chart. I can't even begin to tell you how many things I have used the sticker chart for. So I like stickers.
Yeah. So. When did you find yourself like writing? Did you wake up early in the morning, or did you write when everyone was to bed? Because like you said, your life is still going on and writing this book.
I wrote pretty much any time I could. Again, since I worked for a paper, I'm used to writing and being distracted in the middle of it, which is a really good skill to develop. So whenever I had like 15 or 20 minutes, I could usually string something together. So it was generally kind of all throughout the day. But if things weren't going well, then I would have to wait until there was a chunk of quiet time when I could really focus on it. But if I had a sense of what needed to happen next, I could usually tune everything out, write for 20 minutes, and then do whatever, and then write for another 20 minutes. So
just in the nooks and crannies of your day.
Yeah. You know, that's the way it tends. But there were days when it just was not going well, and it'd be 10 o'clock at night, and I'd still be like, nope, it's not midnight yet. I can do it. So you just do it.
Excellent. So I learned a lot of really surprising things in this book. Like, there were no women's bathrooms in the Senate until 1990.
Yep.
That's wild.
Well, there were no women. I mean, that makes it pretty easy.
Of course, but like, you know, I'm a millennial, don't hold it against me. But I just remember women just being in politics. So knowing that not too long ago there weren't any bathrooms, or the Delgado and Faso race, I didn't know that it was just a matter of 59 votes. That, anyways.
Here in this county, yeah, not overall, but it was, it was close here, yeah.
So my question to you is, what surprised you the most when you were writing this book?
Lots of things. Probably the thing that I've heard people are surprised by when they read the book is how convoluted and interesting the coroners system is. Right?
Yes, I was actually going to ask you at the end as kind of like a little joke. I'm waiting for your history on the coroner. That's so fascinating to me.
Yes. So I wrote that and realized that I had just written 8,000 words, which is a lot of words, about the coroner, and actually emailed my editor and said, so it's really interesting, um, but you're gonna have to be the ultimate judge, because I am fascinated, but I don't know if anybody else will be fascinated by this. And it turns out everybody is fascinated by this. So the short version is that there's a difference between a coroner and a medical examiner. A medical examiner is either a doctor or very close to being a doctor. Whereas anybody can run for coroner. You have to be over the age of 18 and live in the county where you would be the coroner. And that's it. That's the qualification for being the coroner. And it's just fascinating. Most coroners in, at least in Otsego County, but generally, are either former funeral home directors or current funeral home directors. And in Otsego County, they're paid by call. So it's not like it's a full-time job. It's, you earn your living or earn your coroner money per call. Fascinating.
That would be a really good plot for like a mystery book.
I keep telling people this. I want somebody to write this mystery, and I am in no way saying that any of our coroners would ever, I'm not even suggesting this. But if you were a county's coroner, it would be a really good cover if people in your county started dying, because you're the one who decides whether or not this is a suspicious death or a not suspicious death. So you could probably, and you get paid per call. So, you could keep your income up and make sure you don't get investigated. Eventually it would all fall apart, of course. There'd be something that would make it all fall apart, but it would be a great mystery story. I want someone to write this. I don't think it's me, but I want someone to write this.
No one take it. That's what I'm using for NaNoWriMo.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, so the coroner system is fascinating. Fascinating. Did not expect that at all. Yeah.
Neither did we. Jen and I talked about it a little bit today before she left, and we were just really fascinated by that. So the women you referred to in this book, like Stacey Hackenberg from Texas, who is the Justice of the Peace / coroner / multiple other.
She does everything, yeah.
Yes. And Seema Singh Perez from Tennessee. How did you come to know them, or how did they pop up on your radar?
Interestingly, both of them are currently in states where I have lived. So as I was reaching the end of kind of researching, I realized that I didn't have a lot of voices of people who are not exactly like me, and that it would be nice to have a lot more of those voices. So I put out a call to pretty much everybody I knew saying, tell me about the interesting female legislators or mayors or executives where you are. And Stacey and Seema are two that came up, and started to talk to them. And they are, I think everybody has, you could talk to anybody and find a fascinating story, but their stories are particularly, fit particularly well. Yeah, Stacey she has blue hair, and she's in a very conservative part of Texas. And she is currently their Justice of the Peace, which means she does pretty much all of the lower level legal stuff that you can think of. Everything from marriages to signing death certificates to doing small claims court. And Seema is on the Knoxville City Council. And they have an interesting way that they elect their city council. And for the life of me, I'm not sure I can explain it to you without having to write it down. But each district elects their top two, and then it's a citywide election for the final person to represent that district. It's baffling to me. But anyway, so Seema is the other And she's originally from Long Island, which I learned, and moved to Knoxville.
Do you still talk to them by any chance? Are you guys
I
still?
talked to Stacy. Yeah, Seema, life takes you places, and she's, trying to get some things sorted out. But yeah, no, Stacy and I talk all the time. Yeah,
She sounded pretty rad.
she's fun. Yeah.
You have two other memoirs that we talked about briefly, Hillbilly Gothic and Sweater Quest. While the topic is obviously different, is there anything else that sets this book apart from the other two in terms of writing, research, really anything?
So the biggest difference, I think, is that the current book has a lot more of a how-to in it. So like Sweater Quest is about knitting a sweater, but it is not a here's how you knit book. There are a lot of people who have written very good books for that. And Hillbilly Gothic is about postpartum depression, which I had after the birth of my first child. She just started college, so we're all doing well, thanks. And it was not a how-to. So that is the big difference, I think, with this book, is that it's very much a practical information as well as the memoir component.
Wow, you've answered these questions very fast.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I have to think of other ones. But this is a very general question. But what are your future plans? I'm guessing you were reelected in 2019 since you are current. Congratulations. Are you going to keep running, or are you going to reach for higher offices? What are you going to do, Adrienne?
I don't know. I have another one of those ideas that I emailed to my agent and said, hey, I'd like to write about this. And she said, oh, it'll never sell, but why don't you write it up anyway? So there may be another book in there. So, and I still do a lot of freelance writing. So, and I do a lot of writing for a website called Another Mother Runner. It's about running. It's about moms who run. And I have to say, like, and I know Jill is on this call somewhere too, or she was. Things at the county in March, April, May took up a lot more time than they usually do, which is fine. It kind of rearranges all of the other things that you had intended to do or planned to do. But trying to figure out how we were going to make sure people stayed relatively healthy and made sure that our hospitals weren't overwhelmed, and then tried to figure out the finances of how all of this will work in the future. Took up a lot more time than it usually does. So I'm still trying to figure out what comes next. What comes next is September and gorgeous, gorgeous weather. So figure it out from there. Maybe NaNoWriMo. I don't know. But yeah, I am thinking about working on some larger projects, and we'll see what happens. So
I know you written oh, hi Jill. She keeps popping up everywhere. Obviously you wrote a lot of
shout out and holding on.
I know you have written obviously a lot of nonfiction, but have you ever considered writing any fiction, or is there fiction that you have written that I am ignorant to?
No. Fiction is one of those things that I toy with, but it turns out that I'm very good at writing the details, but when it comes to actually having a plot and something at stake, not very good at that. So I've been working on my own deficiencies with that. So yes, no, I would like to write fiction. I think I understand now what was not working before. I was trying to explain it to somebody that, I write a lot of nonfiction and I've been doing it for 25 years at this point. So I kind of know how. That doesn't mean it's always good, but it means that I know kind of what makes a good nonfiction piece. But I don't have that same sense with fiction because I just don't have the experience of it yet. I mean, I understand language, I understand how words go together, but it's the thing that makes fiction work. That part I don't quite understand. But no, I do want to write fiction, so because it looks fun.
What do you think you'd write? A cozy mystery or
no
a thriller?
No, I read a frightening amount of science fiction, like frightening. I write book reviews for a magazine called Locus, which is kind of the trade magazine for science fiction and fantasy. Mm-hmm. I started reading science fiction when I was probably, 12, 13, in my public library in Pittsburgh, which is where I grew up. I had kind of read through all of the kid and young adult books and walked around the corner into the adult section that was right near the kids section, and it was science fiction. Like, had that been mystery, I would read a ton of mysteries. Had that been Westerns, I would read a ton of Westerns. It just was happenstance that was the section that was just around the corner from the kids, they didn't really have young adult when I was in that reading group. Mm-hmm. Or middle grade, like that was not a thing. You had kind of kids books and then you had adult. There was just not a whole lot that bridged that gap. And then started reading just a ton of science fiction and have never really stopped. So yeah.
Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh my gosh.
Some of your titles.
So I really love, there's a writer named Lois McMaster Bujold, love her to death. She doesn't write quickly enough for my taste. There's a writer named John Scalzi, whose books always amuse me, very much. Fun space opera, all the, battles in space, vast galactic empires. I decided to reread Dune. Did
you see the trailer for the new movie?
I saw the trailer and I was like, I have not read this in probably 25 years, so I am going to read it now again. And when I was a teenager, I probably read it like a dozen times because you have so much more time when you're a teenager. And did not realize how much of it was still in my brain. Like as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh no, I know exactly. Like the language, I know exactly what it says. It's weird. I'm just trying to think of the books that I have. Like I get excited when I see them. There's a writer, oh shoot, I cannot remember her name. Leckie, Anne Leckie, Leckie. Her most recent book is kind of a retelling of Hamlet, but you don't know it's Hamlet until you're kind of 3/4 of the way into it and suddenly go, I see what you're doing. Her most recent book is very good, and I cannot for the life of me remember the title, but it's a very good. But yeah, no, I'll pick up almost anything and see what happens. And I read a lot of nonfiction as well. I think How Do I Find the Time?
That's from Tina.
That's from Tina. That's what I figured. I don't know. Things, you find a way. The Raven Tower, thank you, Jen. That's what the Hamlet one is. I don't know. Like, I think some of it is an occupational hazard where I read and write relatively quickly. My husband and I went to the same college, and it used to irritate him that I could read the assignments faster, but I was like, yeah, but your grades are always better. So, it balances out. It balances out is what I'm saying. So I'm not saying that as like a huge kind of brag. It's just it is something that I do quickly. I recently made the decision to leave the college and try to just do the freelance thing for a bit and see what happens. Because I was feeling like I just didn't have time at all. My kids are big, so it's not like I have small children. My kids one is in college and one is 15, so he'd just as soon not have us around pestering him anyway. So with smaller kids, I did not get nearly anything done. One of the reasons why there's such a big gap between Sweater Quest and this book is I had small children and I just could not. You can't do all of it. So you kind of have to pick and choose. So, yeah.
All right, well, I'm all done with my questions. If anybody has any questions, just please put them in the chat. We'll wait just a few moments.
Yeah, Jen and I can geek out about science fiction writers. That might be
sure. She's a good one. I ask all my science fiction questions too. I'm like, what books are we getting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was I still am, although I know he's problematic in many ways, but I was a huge Robert Heinlein fan back in the day. Problematic. You read it now and you're kind of like, oh dear. But one of my favorites.
That's a question.
Yes, definite encouragement. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to stress again, make sure you're registered to vote and make sure that you fill out your census form. If you go online, it'll walk you right through it. And whether or not you need to fill it out here or if there's some other place you need to fill it out. So
you can make an appointment to come to the library and take the census. It literally takes less than 10 seconds. Not 10
it's
seconds,
quick.
10 minutes. It's very fast. And it's so important for this region's advocacy, representation, so many things. The census is so important, and this year it has been extended. Yes. So if you don't have a computer, smartphone, come visit us and we won't walk you through it because we
can set you up.
Yes, but there's little note cards at each computer that tells you where to go for the census. It's very easy.
Yep. So Tracy Verma has a question.
Yes.
And if you type it in.
It looks like Jen had one.
Yes.
First.
So if I write fiction, will my agent handle that representation as well? Maybe. It's really, she does handle some fiction writers. I think it would depend if she read it and went, because she's not a genre. She doesn't do a lot of genre stuff. So if I wrote science fiction, she would be like, yeah, maybe you should, here are 5 people you should maybe talk to. So it would just kind of depend. So did I find that although I wasn't a politician, it wasn't that difficult to morph into your new role with the county? And that was Tracy's question. It really, I mean, it wasn't difficult to morph into like the county office role. I discovered that running for office and being in office are such different things. Like running for office is very much the politician stuff, where you're trying to talk to everybody and get your message across and make sure it's a consistent message. Actually being in office, it's a lot like being a project manager. It's just, we're just trying to make sure the wheels stay on the bus. Like, this is all we're trying to do. We're trying to move from A to B. Here are the things we need to do as we're moving from A to B. Here are the limitations. Keep the wheels on the bus. And the hardest part with that was just getting up to speed with all of the acronyms, all of the different programs. So if you get into something like DSS, which is the Department of Social Services, as you start to kind of take apart how that's funded and all of the different places in the state and in the federal system that it intersects and how one influences the other, I understand even now, maybe 60% of that, like how the money goes from point A to point B, but I also know the people to ask. And I have yet to meet somebody who works in the county government who it will not answer any question, no matter how basic. Like, if you go, okay, so I'm not understanding how we got from point A to point B, like all of the little intermediate steps, can you just walk me through that? More than happy to walk you through how all of it happens. So yeah, the part that I personally find hard are the politician things, like where you knock on doors and do debates and that kind of stuff. I find more challenging just for me, but the actual being in government part, I really enjoy. So I like keeping the wheels on the bus. I like keeping the bus moving down the road. And I like the challenges that sometimes come up. The last 5 months I could do with fewer of those challenges, but the normal course of action challenges I actually really enjoy quite a bit. So yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, they're kind of two separate roles. Yeah. I know, Jill, that you're surprised that I like sci-fi. Everybody is. I don't look like a sci-fi fan, but I love it. I love it. Give me a good spaceship flying through space, shooting at each other. I am all about it. Bring it on. Yeah.
I have another question that I just thought of. What has the past, 5 months looked like for you as a county rep with COVID and everything?
So the first 3 weeks were 4 weeks when it really started to sink in that this was serious and this was not going to be quick. They were more about the worry about what is going to happen to our hospitals, what's going to happen with our medical staff, what is this going to look like? Is there going to be an explosion of cases here? Kind of all of that immediate crisis management kind of stuff. And then once we started to realize that this was going to be the long haul, now it's about finances and trying to figure out how to get the budget to balance, because a lot of Otsego County's income is sales tax based because of the Hall of Fame. And of course, nothing happened at the Hall of Fame, or not, things happened at the Hall of Fame, but not nearly to the extent that we were anticipating. And when we built the budget, we anticipated it was going to be a huge induction year. And then, of course, none of that actually occurred. So it's now a matter, and the state has pretty much told us that the money we have already budgeted from them for 2020, we'll be only getting about 80% of that. Well, because the bottom dropped out of their sales tax income as well. So it's just kind of a knock-on effect. So now trying to figure out how we're going to deal with the bills we've already incurred. And then knowing that with a medical crisis, you kind of spend the money that you have to spend right up front to make sure that actual lives are being saved. And then later you have to go back and figure out, so now how do we cover that? So we have to figure out 2020, and then we have to figure out 2021, not knowing what that's going to look like, because, it does not look like, February 1st, that suddenly there will be no more COVID and everything will be back to normal. Like, we don't know. We don't know. Yes.
Right.
So
Well,
we just kind of have to keep kind of making one guess and going with that guess. And then when that proves not to be the good guess, we then make another guess. And because this is it's been so long since it's been 100 years since we've had a pandemic. So, we're just trying to piece it together as we go along. So it can be a lot sometimes. So that's what it looks like right now. There are a lot of conversations like, no, we don't want to have to cut all this stuff, but we also don't want to raise taxes, but we also have to do some of it because it's mandated by the state. And, it's just like, oh, great. I don't know how this works. So we'll figure it out. Might be a little ugly, might be a little stressful, but we'll figure it out. And I'm not, Tracy, I'm not watching away on Netflix. So yeah, I haven't started it yet. Yeah. No, I mean, it's my pleasure to do. I knew what I was signing up for. It's a lot more than I thought right now. That's all,
yes. For everybody, I'm sure. Yes. All in it together.
Yes.
Trying to feel our way through it. So, all right. If we don't have any more questions, I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. As soon as I started reading your book, I was like, I can't wait to talk to her. So it's been a joy tonight. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me, and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks again.